Welcome back to Reliving Retro. This is Season 5, Episode 6. And if you're new here, we play a random game every single week, and we invite a guest on to rate it in 5 different categories: story, gameplay, visuals, sound, and how well it aged. And this week, we have a very special guest, and I'll allow him to introduce himself. Go ahead, man.
Hey everyone, my name is Gonçalo, also known as Stika. I have a YouTube channel called Stika's Retro Corner, where I do retro game reviews. I talk a little bit about gaming history from Portugal and Brazil because I'm Portuguese, and that's pretty much it, I guess.
Yeah, thank you again so much for joining us, Stika. I mean, it's super late where you are right now, and it's fairly early where we are. So, just a huge time difference. We really appreciate the joining us there. I think you're by far the farthest person to join the show. So that's really cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to help you cover new grounds then.
For sure. Thanks again. So you can follow us at Reliving Retro on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, TikTok, Spotify if you're watching on YouTube, and YouTube if you're listening on Spotify. We also have a Twitch where we play the game of the week. Over there, we stream that live. And we also have a Patreon where for $2 a month, you can suggest a game for us to play for our Patreon poll. We do a Patreon poll once a month. Our next one is in 2 weeks. So if you want, you still have time to get in, submit that game into the Patreon poll. And we can play that game a lot quicker because the Patreon list is much smaller than our master list, which is reaching, I think, 300 games at this point.
Damn.
Yeah. So... Yeah, that's it. Just a few hundred. Stika, where can they find you on the socials?
The good thing about having such an uncommon channel name is that as soon as you type my name on Google, you'll find everywhere where I'm at. So you just need to type ST1KA or Stika, except I replaced the I with a 1. And you'll find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Patreon, yada, 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 basically.
Everywhere, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Very cool. All right, so just a couple getting to know you questions. What was your introduction to gaming? Maybe how old you were when you got your first console, what the console was, who you got it from, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I was like 4 years old when I got my first console. It was a bootleg Famiclone, which had 42 games in its memory. This must have been 1991, 92, give or take.
Wow, I didn't know they did that back then. That's crazy.
Me either. That's what.
Oh yeah, like bootleg consoles were very popular in some parts of Europe, including Portugal and South America, most of the Middle East, Asia, Russia. It was very popular in a lot of countries where the economies weren't quite as strong and people couldn't afford official video game consoles. So mine came with 42 games already embedded into the console, including the original Super Mario Bros. And most of the other games were pretty much very early Famicom games, like Pac-Man, Galaga, like just really early titles. Like
a lot of like arcade ports and stuff like that.
Yeah, you wouldn't find a Ninja Gaiden or a Mario 2 or a Mega Man. No. Those came later, and they were not in my console. The cool thing, though, is that it also ran bootleg cartridges, and those were fairly easy to find in my country. So I played a lot of bootleg NES games growing up.
That's cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy that bootleg consoles existed back then. Really, I think like the first bootleg consoles I remember seeing, obviously other than GameSphere or whatever it was. What was it in that movie, Yaiser? In Malibu's Most Wanted, what do they call it?
The Gamecast?
Gamecast, that's what it was, where he called it the Gamecast. I think that was like my first like recollection of like there being like bootleg consoles out there. But a lot of the new like classics, like the NES Classic, SNES Classic, like there's tons of bootlegs of those all over the place. And obviously like we're getting into the bootlegs where there's like Pokemon bootlegs are all over the place now, like on eBay, and they're littered all over Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that. So
it's got to the point where I'm actually afraid to buy Game Boy and Game Boy Advanced games because a lot of times you actually cannot tell them apart. Like some of them are fairly obvious with the low quality stickers.
Yep.
But some of them, unless you open the cartridge and look at the PCB, you're not going to know if it's official or not.
It's really, really hard to tell. There's two like main indicators, especially for the Game Boy Advance Pokemon games. where if the number on the front of the cartridge is stamped, that's a really good sign that it's real. And then if you look through the back of the see-through casing, you should be able to see 4 gold squares in the upper left-hand corner. And and that should be a pretty good sign as well. Otherwise, it'll kind of look like a constellation with all the soldering points in the back of the cartridge. So
the issue is a lot of times those eBay adverts hide those features. They hide those features on purpose.
Yeah, of course. Yep. So really, if you're trying to buy like Pokemon Game Boy Advance games online and the price seems too good to be true, there's probably a reason.
It's probably too good to be true.
Yeah.
And it's not even just Game Boy. I had a friend of mine who bought Chrono Trigger for the Nintendo DS, and turns out it was a bootleg. So not even the DS is safe.
I know, it's sad. They're getting really good at it too, which is unfortunate. But okay, what are some of your favorite types of games to play? Like your favorite genres?
Well, these days I mostly tend to go for role playing games, either Japanese or Western. I like pretty much all types. I also love strategy games, both turn-based, real-time, grand strategy, and I also I also enjoy FPS games, shooters, action adventure games. It's basically, I would say, almost everything as long as it's single player and not a racing game or not a sports game, I guess. And also, I'll admit, I kind of fallen out of love with 3D platformers these days. I can't really enjoy them anymore for some reason.
I get you. Is that of any era, or is that like of a particular age?
I would say like almost any era. I think the only 3D platformer I can still enjoy is maybe Mario 64, but even that is more out of nostalgia than because of the game itself, I guess.
Have you played Mario Odyssey?
I have not, because it's a platformer.
I would give it a shot. It's really good.
I didn't even buy it.
Yeah, I would give that one a shot. I mean, that one to me is like the best Mario entry since Super Mario World. That's just my opinion. Yeah,
okay, now that is interesting.
Very, very good. I think it's the best Mario 3D platformer they've done.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, what games have you been playing lately?
Well, as far as modern games go, I've been playing Guardians of the Galaxy for the PS4, mostly because the third movie came out like last week or so, and I'm like, yeah, okay, now I feel like playing the game, so I started playing it, and I'm enjoying it. It's not great, but it's good. It's good enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Definitely not on the level of Spider-Man, of Insomniac Spider-Man. But as far as retro games go, I'm not sure if I count this as retro. I'm like currently working on a video where I review a lot of modern games for the NES. So I've played like 26 of them over the past 2 weeks, I guess. So I think that counts as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So by modern games for the NES, you mean like new releases for it, right?
Yep, new releases, also known as homebrews, aftermarket games. There's still like no one name for this new style, this new segment, I guess.
Right. Yeah. It's really cool that there's people still making new cartridge-based games too. You know, they're coming out for all different consoles. I've seen them come out for Game Boy, NES, Super Nintendo, N64, Sega Genesis. So it's really cool that there's still people doing that.
That's cool. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. Like I would say that the NES, the Game Boy, and the Sega Genesis are like the top 3.
Yeah.
In fact, I would go as far as to say that like it's a close race between the NES and Sega Genesis in terms of games and quality. Like a lot of these are just incredibly good, like really good.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played a ton of them, but I do know that from what I've seen and the reviews that I've heard, like they like stand up with some of the best games on the console.
Yeah, no jokes. Some of these would give Konami and Capcom a run for their money, and I'm not even exaggerating here.
Damn.
Yeah, it's so cool to see that, especially from so many like independent developers.
For sure.
You had mentioned RPGs earlier. I just want to pick your brain for a second, and then we can move on to the game that we played this week. But what would you say some of your favorite, like if you had to give like a top 3, I guess, on the spot, Super Nintendo RPGs? I'm just very curious.
Super Nintendo, very interesting choice.
Specifically.
but mostly because I'm a Sega fan. But I would say Final Fantasy VI, because I love that game. Chrono Trigger, because I really love that game as well.
Yep.
My third game is definitely more difficult to pick. I don't want to go with another SquareSoft game though. Let me think a little. Maybe. Forgetting the name.
I want to throw one out.
I'm forgetting the name. Oh my god! Just give me a second.
No, you're good.
There is even a remake for it for the PS4 recently. It's an action RPG for the Super Nintendo.
Secret of Mana.
Secret of Mana. There you go. Is that Squaresoft as well? Is that Squaresoft?
I think so.
I think it is.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's 3 Squaresoft games. There you go.
But you like Squaresoft. We get it.
They were kind of killing it back then, huh?
They really were.
Pretty well. Yeah.
They really were.
I wasn't sure if you were an Earthbound guy, because the whole reason why we started this show was that Yaiser had never played Earthbound. I had never played Chrono Trigger, so we kind of wanted to make each other play the game. So
I have never played Earthbound, and I'll be honest, when I look at the game, I'm like, I don't know if I want to play this.
Yeah,
like the art style is very weird, and the whole theme of it is also a bit weird for me.
Yeah, it's definitely different, but that's why I recommend it, because I feel like if you've played the other RPGs, then you've kind of played them all. Earthbound's the one that really sticks out as being so different that you have to play it. That's
understandable. That's understandable.
All right, so we did that. Yaiser, did you have a question?
I was gonna ask him where Super Mario RPG was on that list for him.
I like the Mario RPG games, not just for the Super Nintendo, but even the GBA ones. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I don't like. Okay, I'm not gonna say I don't like the combat, but I'm gonna say after a few hours, it starts kind of bothering me, because you have to press the button inputs at the correct timing, and I can do it, but I would rather not have to. So I like the game.
I get it.
But the combat is kind of hit or miss for me, I guess, depending on my mood.
Yeah, I get that. Fair. We played through Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, and that one has even more combat than Mario RPG.
Yeah, that got a little.
To be fair,
taxing.
I enjoy the games. I do. I just there's just something about the combat that after an hour, I'm just like, okay, I need to stop for a while.
Yeah, it's one of those things, because a lot of RPGs you can kind of coast through. You can't with those ones. You really have to be paying attention the entire time. There's no button mashing to get through the battles.
Yep, exactly.
All right, so let's move on to Perfect Dark, which is the game that we played this week. Just roundtable this one. Yaiser, had you ever played this game before this week?
Yeah, I think we had rented it or something back. Maybe we did own it. I'm not sure, but I remember playing it a little bit back in the day.
Cool. I had never played it before. It was one of those ones that I owned while I was collecting, and I think I popped it in for 5 minutes or so just to kind of see if the cart worked. It did. I was happy. Threw it up on my shelf. Never played it again. I had always assumed GoldenEye was just better, so I'd never really even wanted to give it a chance.
They were virtually the same game to me back then.
Yeah.
Even some of the multiplayer maps were exactly the same, just
is this a good time to say that I think GoldenEye is a bit overrated?
No, I mean,
it's good.
Yeah, it's a good time to say that. I mean, I think we haven't gotten to it yet to completely relive it, but I would say it's probably overrated. I think people just remember the fun that they had with the multiplayer. Yeah, it's just the nostalgic factor that kind of lifts it up, and I think that actually happens a lot with the N64. So, Stika, I don't know. Your opinions on the N64 in general, but I do think that the N64 as a console is probably a little bit overrated, just because of all the fun people had with it as kids and the multiplayer and all that stuff.
But I'm laughing because I've had some very controversial tweets on Twitter about my opinions on the N64, and boy, some people were really hurt by those tweets.
Were you the one that went semi-viral a couple months back about it?
I went viral 3 times.
Okay.
But the last tweet, but the last anti N64 tweet that went viral wasn't mine. So
okay.
Mine were all from last year. But if you see somewhere some tweets were basically saying that the Sega Saturn has a better library than the N64, those were mine.
Oh, and you were saying before we started recording that in your country, the Sega Saturn completely outsold the N64. Is that correct?
Yep. The thing is, the Sega Saturn was very popular here. The only reason the PlayStation eventually surpassed the Sega Saturn was because the Saturn died everywhere else in the world. Because up until then, the Saturn was just outselling everything. Basically, it was the more popular brand, the established brand, and it had a killer app that neither the PlayStation or the N64 had, basically.
And that's Nintendo so crazy to think.
And Nintendo was never really very popular here. I would say that the Nintendo Switch was probably the first time a Nintendo console has sold well here.
Wow, not even the Wii, huh?
The Wii, like at first it sold really poorly, and then it started selling well. Like I would say during the 2 final years of its lifetime, basically, because we used to have like a regional distributor here, and then Nintendo established their own offices in Portugal, and that's when things changed, basically.
Gotcha. It's just so wild to hear the complete like opposite side of the story, where like, you know, like I was saying before, I only knew one person I think that had a Sega Saturn when I was a kid, and to the point like I go to garage sales all the time, and like I find like N64 stuff and PS1 stuff. I've never found anything Sega Saturn. I've been going to garage sales for over a decade. I've never seen anything Sega Saturn at a garage sale, and I've only even owned one Sega Saturn before. I bought it from a retro game store, and I think the only games I played for it were Nights in the Dream and 3 Dirty Dwarfs, which is so much fun, by the way.
Controversial opinion. I think Nights is a little overrated as well.
I felt like that playing it. I was like, man, a lot of people talk this game up. I'm not really having that much fun.
No, it's not that great, to be honest. In my opinion, what really makes the Saturn great is the 2D games, the platformers, the beat 'em ups, the shooters, the running guns. That's where the Saturn really shines. The issue is you'll have to import a lot of those games.
Oh, right. Yeah, because in Japan they had a ton of Sega Saturn games, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like in Japan, like the truth is the Sega Saturn library is actually 3 times larger than the Nintendo 64's library. It was close to 1,000 games. Yeah, it's just
that's crazy.
Only like 200 of those came to the West, like 200 or 300. So a very small portion.
Yeah, that's wild. And you said Final Fantasy VI earlier. This is the last tangent before we get into Perfect Dark. You mentioned Final Fantasy VI earlier. Where you are, did you get that? Was it called Final Fantasy VI when you got it, or was it Final Fantasy III?
I don't think the Final Fantasy games ever launched in Portugal, mostly for 2 reasons. The Super Nintendo was not very popular here. The Mega Drive outsold it by quite a huge margin.
Sega land over there, huh?
Jeez. Oh, Portugal was always a Sega land, yes. I think the only exception was the Game Boy. The Game Boy sold really well here.
Gotcha.
But yeah, and the second reason is games were never translated. So RPGs tended to sell very poorly because kids didn't speak English, basically.
That makes sense. All right. Well, it's so super interesting to get a different perspective on the gaming industry and how you grew up with games in a completely different country, especially considering like it's honestly the complete opposite of how it was here in the US. It's just so interesting to get that perspective. So I thank you for that. But let's move on to Perfect Dark here. Stika, had you played Perfect Dark before this week?
I played the Perfect Dark remaster on the Xbox 360 some 8 years ago or 10 years ago.
Cool.
Now I went back and played it on an emulator, so I could get like the full Perfect Dark experience, the original Perfect Dark experience.
Yeah.
I do think I remember thinking it was better than GoldenEye, and I still think it's better than GoldenEye at least.
Okay, that's cool. So let's start off here. Let's get into story. Stika, do you want to start us off in story?
Oh, sure. So the thing about the story is, I love the cyberpunk setting. I love this notion where it's like just companies fighting between themselves and espionage and counter-espionage. Here's where the game loses me. Aliens. As soon as the aliens come in, I'm sorry, this might be a spoiler. I apologize. But
no, we're good. We're a spoiler. Okay. We're a spoiler show.
As soon as the aliens come in, my interest in the plot just like nosedives. I have no interest in Elvis. I have no interest in the Greys. I have no interest in the giant bugs. Like, just give me more like cyberpunk, cyber espionage between companies, please. So I'm gonna give it a 3. If it was like just the cyberpunk settings, I will give like a 4 or a 5. But because I have no interest in the alien wars, I'm downgrading to a 3 for that reason alone.
It's funny you say that. So I'm going to piggyback right off here, you here, because I actually agree 100%. I had it at a 3, and I thought that once you got to that, specific part with the Area 51 and all that stuff, it's just kind of like, so wait, what's happening now?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it gets kind of interesting. It gets kind of weird. It's almost like you would have rather played a 2-hour game and just enjoyed it for what it was, rather than an 8-hour game and been really confused with the whole later half of it.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I ended up giving it a 3 as well, because I actually thought it was pretty decent for what it was, and then it got kind of weird. I also thought it was interesting that it took place in an alternate 2023.
Oh shit,
that's this year. So I thought that was pretty cool. I gave it an extra half a point just for being for taking place this year.
I didn't even notice that.
Which is funny, because I would give it I would grade it higher. Like, they had no idea I was gonna play it this year.
Still waiting for my laptop gun.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so Yaiser, where'd you land on this?
I gave it a 3 too. I read a little bit about it. I didn't dive too deep into reading it, and I didn't get far enough in the game to see fucking aliens. So, but yeah, I thought the game did a pretty good job of explaining what was going on with all the cutscenes and stuff in the middle and shit.
Yeah,
in between missions. I thought that was cool. I didn't remember games back then having cutscenes like that, but I thought it was okay. If I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know. My brain wasn't really following along, so maybe it could have been a little higher. I don't know, but yeah, I was at a 3 too.
I will say, and I don't know if this necessarily goes against just the story, or it definitely affected the gameplay a little bit for me, is the beginning of the game is they sort of set it up like you're going to have a tutorial, and you follow that dude around, and he's showing you around the building.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's just he's like, okay, see ya.
Have fun.
And I'm like, okay, but wait, where do I go? Do I just go to the hangar? Is that what I do? Do I go back? Should I try to do some of this training stuff? Do I have a gun? I don't even have a gun.
And you can pilot like a bike or whatever, but you don't really do anything with it. It's kind of weird.
They give you that bike, and then I'm just like, okay, cool. I can open up this garage and I can get out of here. No, you can't open the garage. And you don't fit through the doorway with the bike, and you're just like, I guess this was just to jump on the bike and zoom around this little room for a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't really mess around in there at all.
It kind of feels like a tech demo, basically.
Yeah, it was really weird. So I kind of docked the story a little bit for that too, but I also kind of docked gameplay for it. So that's a pretty good transition. Let's get into gameplay. Yaiser, you want to kick us off for gameplay?
Sure, yeah. I gave it a 3.5. I thought it was okay, but a little better than okay. Once I started, so I played on my phone with my Kishi controller, right? And I completely had to map all my controls. And once I got it feeling comfy, I was like, okay, I can play this. But I don't know, a couple of the missions, the second mission where you have to take a picture of the thing in the the radioactive fucking crystal or whatever.
Yeah,
I didn't know what the fuck I was doing for a really long time, and I feel like the game didn't really explain that. I already had the fucking camera. Apparently, all I had to do was go to my inventory.
Yeah,
didn't know that, but so that took me a little while. But once I got the hang of it, I was having fun with it. Honestly, I was just playing before the show. Honestly,
yeah.
Yeah, I think 3.5 is pretty fair.
If you watch my playthrough, which will be out on our YouTube channel on Wednesday, you'll probably see me having the same issue with the cam spy thing, and I'm like, do I have this? What is this cam spy thing? Because I'm looking at the objectives, and I'm like, did somebody teach me how to use this? Did they show me that I have it? And then I look in my inventory, and I'm like, oh, I have it already. I don't have to look for it. So then I use it, and I'm like, so I go in there and I look around, and I'm like, okay, cool. I looked around, and then I come back out, and I'm like, what was I supposed to do in there? And then I realized that if I pulled Z or whatever, if I press Z, then I can take pictures. I will say, as far as the gameplay goes, the N64 controller has a ton of face buttons. I was very, very annoyed. There are some parts in this game where I feel like it showed that you could get something if you ducked or if you crouched. I could not for the life of me figure out how to crouch, and I wasn't trying to like look it up, but I I could not figure it out at all. And I'm like, C down, is it L? No, L is also zoom, or L is also like targeting, R is targeting, Z is shoot. I can't figure it out. I was pressing all the buttons, and I felt like I just felt like a lot of them kind of did the same thing. Like there wasn't a ton of like variety in like the buttons at all. Like I mean, B was kind of like your action button, right? And then like A was like your switch weapon button, Z shot obviously, and then there was like the C buttons would like strafe back and forward and whatever. And then the D-pad would just kind of look up and down, but then so would and then the joystick would just like move. So I was just like, I don't know. There's a ton of like movement based things here. Like that's annoying to me. Where I feel like they could have utilized the C buttons a little bit better.
I would go as far as to say that the N64 controller has not aged well either.
No, it sucks.
I would say it makes every game a little actively worse, I guess.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I will say though, the gameplay was actually pretty fun once I got into it. And as far as the N64 controls go, and other FPSs that we've played, so far for the show we've played Turok and we've played Quake 64, and this is far and away controlled way better than both of those. And I thought it was way more fun and just more intuitive. So as far as like FPSs on the N64 is concerned, I gave gameplay a 4 because I actually had a good time with it. I thought it was pretty easy to just kind of pick up and play, other than not being able to know how to crouch. But I thought that all the different like types of guns were fun to use, and it was really just kind of like the actual gameplay itself, like I said, was intuitive. However, the story like progression and like where I'm supposed to go and that kind of stuff, that stuff wasn't as intuitive, which I think knocked down the gameplay a little bit. But Stika, what about you?
For me, gameplay was also a 4. I think. Okay, so here's the thing. I think that pretty much almost every FPS game for 32-bit consoles and the N64 have either aged poorly or were never that great to begin with. I think the only exception here are like boomer shooters like Doom or Alien Trilogy. I think Perfect Dark is probably as good as you're ever going to get for that generation as far as FPS, as non-boomer shooters go for consoles. I mean, you have a lot of interesting guns. I really enjoyed the laptop gun. The levels are large. They're usually well designed, if a bit chaotic. Like you said, it's very easy to get lost or not know what you're doing.
Yep.
But at the same time, they also have some pretty interesting ideas. Like, for example, you might not have tried this, but they have like an option called Counter Spy, in which you play as Joanna Dark and your friend plays as the various NPCs in the game, and he's trying to stop you. And then, of course, we have the multiplayer, which you can play against bots. Even though it's very, very susceptible to camping. But there's like a lot of modes. So I would say the campaign as a whole is maybe like a 3.5.
Yeah.
But the extra modes, the extra little trinkets and the challenge modes, and because there's also like secret challenges that you unlock by beating the game, then you have to do those as well, where you get to play as the aliens in some of them. So because of all those little extra things, I'm bumping it up to a 4. But even then, it does help that I've played with a PS4 controller on an emulator, because if I was using an N64 emulator, I would have bucked a few points down, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I did use an N64 controller. I felt like I kind of owed it to myself to be miserable. No, no, I don't know. I tried. I'm going to be completely honest. I tried to use my Xbox One controller for it, and I couldn't get it to sync to the emulator. So I used my N64 controller, and that got to sync. And I was just like, all right, I guess I'll use that.
I guess you're stuck with it.
Yeah. No, but that's a really good point about all the extra modes. And I think maybe our gameplay could have even been higher if me and Yaiser had like the time to play it together. A lot of these games that we play, like if we have a chance to play the multiplayer, the gameplay usually goes way through the roof because of that. But
yeah, I meant to bring that up too. I'm glad you did, Stika.
Like Counter Spy is a really interesting concept. I kind of wish somebody had developed more, because like someone plays as the main character and the other person plays as the various NPC enemies. So they have worse weapons, they have lower health, but there's a lot of them basically. That's the whole idea.
That
It
sounds
reminds me of, like-
awesome, honestly.
It kind of reminds me of, and I've never played this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of sounds like a D&D type of situation where like
Honestly-
there's like a dungeon master. and
Oh,
you
you
have
get
to
to-
fight
yeah.
against them.
Kind of. I mean, yeah, kind of in a way. I mean, you don't, like you can only control one NPC at a time, but yeah, basically.
That's cool. Yeah, that is a really cool mode. Maybe at some point, because we say this a lot, like we'll have to get together and play some of these games multiplayer and kind of just try to find out.
But then
you know,
we
how
gotta
much
play
more
all the
enjoyable
other
they are.
games and all.
Yeah, exactly. There's
It's hard
so
to go
many
back.
games.
There's
So many
just-
games.
There's too many games.
Yeah, true. We're gonna be at too many games
We
coming
are.
up pretty soon here. But all right. So I think that's fair for gameplay. Let's move over to visuals. All right, I'll kick it off for visuals because I feel like it's my turn. As far as N64 goes, this is one of the better looking N64 games I think that we've played so far, especially the environment. The faces still look like they're like the stretched like shrink wrap on a 3D polygon. You know what I mean? Like the faces still don't
Yeah.
look great.
The funny thing is, if you play the Xbox 360 remaster, they added in a new face. They added in Peter Molyneux's face. I don't know. Do you know who that is? Peter Molyneux,
No, I don't.
the guy who made Fable, the Fable series, and
Oh, cool.
he was like the boss at Microsoft Games for like a few years.
Nice.
So it's kind of funny because you can technically shoot the guy who made the Fable games in the Xbox 360 remaster.
Well, Fable's a pretty good one for Yaiser, right? That's one of your favorites.
Yeah, it's one of my highest scoring games.
Yeah,
So far.
I
Fable's
really like the series, though. A lot of people have
So
a
good.
lot of hate for it.
It's unwarranted.
I agree. I agree. It's mostly because Peter Molyneux overpromised a lot of things, but I think the games themselves are really great.
Getting back to the visuals here, I think the worst part about the visuals for me was just I could not tell what was a door, what wasn't a door.
I
That was
hated it.
the most confusing part. There was like the shooting training, and there's just this entire glass wall where it kind of shows you the shooting range, and then there's another glass section I just assumed was a part of said glass wall, and I'm like, how do I get in there? And it took me forever to figure out that that's a glass door. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, definitely make the door look exactly like the wall. I'm like, hopefully they don't do that for the rest of the levels. And then sure enough, we're going through like this the big building here, and then so many times there's like, I'm like, where do I go? There's like nowhere for me to go.
Yeah.
And then there's like these decorative things on the wall that for the most part weren't doors, but then sometimes they were doors.
Are they
And it
supposed to be like?
drove
Are
me-
they supposed to be hidden like secret doors?
I don't know, but it drove me insane, and I
That was
hated it.
that's the only way I let it slide by, is that they were supposed to be like hidden doors.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for all that and like the hard to navigate environments, even though the environments for what it's worth, I thought looked pretty good for an N64 game. I gave visuals a 3.5 just for the frustration. But Stika, how'd you feel?
For me, I gave visuals a 4.5. I mean, it is a late N64 game, and it's made by Rare, and it uses the expansion pack. So on a technical level, that's probably as good as you're ever going to get. I really like the art style on a lot of the environmental buildings, mostly the sci-fi buildings, like the offices. There's a building where you start off on a street, and you see a few NPCs, like just a few citizens walking around. I really enjoy that. What usually holds it back for me is the outside environments. Like there's a snow level, and the snow looks really bad. It honestly looks like I'm playing an Atari Jaguar game almost.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the snow level looks really bad.
How'd that sell in Portugal?
Oh,
couldn't have sold well.
I'm not sure we even had it here. I've never seen one here, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
But
Well, I'm just making sure.
like the snow level, for example, it just looks like white walls, basically, almost no detail. It's so it's like the inside levels look really good, the outside levels not so great. But then you also have the character models. You have some really great lighting. like when you walk around in the dark and there's like a lamp or something, you see reflections or and like light sources. That's really impressive technology wise. So I'm gonna go with a 4.5, even though those outside levels look really bad.
Yeah, if I could just interject for a second, I do think sometimes there were some levels where you could like where you started off on like the roof. I think the very first level you start off on the roof. I thought all that looked pretty cool.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the streets of Chicago I didn't think looked that bad, for what it's worth. But yeah, the
Oh,
snow levels I thought looked awful.
The streets look really good. The streets look really good. It's when you get like mountains
world
or
kind of,
snow.
yeah.
Yeah. That's when it looks bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, what about you, Yaiser?
So here's my problem. I never made it out of the building, right? The big building at the beginning. Yep. I only made it through the first 3 missions. I think I was on mission 4 at like the beginning of it. So basically the whole game looked exactly the same to me.
So yeah, because the first 2 missions are all like indoors or
yeah, it's all in that same building. So so that probably hurt my score a little bit here. And I did think it looked better than some of the other N64 games we played, but still not great. I don't think any of these games look great. So I gave it a 3. I was a little more harsh than you guys.
Understandable.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. I will say though, I think this game deserves a little bit more props, only in the sense that, and maybe it's due to the upgraded like jumper pack that they used, but most FPS games on the N64 were kind of just littered with fog effect to just make up for the lack of distance, and I didn't really see that as much in this game, so I thought that that was a solid.
Yeah, well, I only saw hallways, so I didn't really see any open area.
Fair. All right, let's move over to sound. Stika, you want to start us off for sound?
Sure. For sound, I'm giving it a 3.5. Like, it has a lot. It has like a lot of voice acting, which is kind of impressive for a cartridge game. And I like some of the songs, but overall, the soundtrack, I honestly cannot remember a single song right now. So the soundtrack is pretty forgettable. And I mean, the sound effects are fine. They do their job fine. Honestly, the only reason why I'm giving it that extra 0.5 is for all the voice acting the game has. Which again for a Nintendo 64 game, that was pretty rare.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yaiser, what about you?
I was literally all my points were gonna be all the points you made. I thought the music while playing, I thought like, oh, this music's pretty cool, but none of it was like memorable. And I mean, not to sound like a broken record here, but yeah, the sound effects were okay, and I thought the voice acting was cool. Honestly, it surprised me. I don't remember any other games back then having like cutscenes of voice acting like that.
Right. In that regard, the game was really impressive. Yeah.
So where'd you land, Yaiser?
Oh, 3.5 also.
Oh, okay, cool. I was assuming that because you said you didn't want to sound like a broken record, but I made you play anyway. Yeah. All right. I actually landed a little bit above you guys, honestly, for all the same points, except I was a little bit more impressed with, I think, like the actual sound effects of like the guns and stuff like that. The voice acting did impress me because I think that even more heralded games like Silent Hill for the PS1 is just considered a far better game normally, I would say, than people would consider Perfect Dark, and the voice acting in that I think is way worse than the voice acting in Perfect Dark.
Oh yeah. That was a common issue with PS1 games. Yeah.
So I was actually pretty impressed with the voice acting in this game, and the songs, they're not nearly as memorable as even like GoldenEye or whatever. This honestly seemed like it was like GoldenEye's kind of like I guess like B-side in a sense. It was like the songs that didn't make the GoldenEye record. But it's still Grant Kirkhope. He's still amazing. I thought that they were really good for what they needed to be. Like, I thought that they fit the scene and stuff like that. And even I even noticed like when action would pick up, so would the music, and I thought that was really cool. So I landed on a 4 for sound. I thought it was probably right up there with gameplay. I thought it was the best part about the game. All right, let's move over to aged. Yaiser, how do you feel that this game aged?
It honestly, it surprised me a little bit because we've had a pretty bad track with N64 games, I think, other than like Super Mario 64.
Right.
But I honestly I enjoyed it, and it didn't look awful. It controlled fine. It didn't feel that old. Granted, I didn't use an N64 controller, but
Right.
I landed at a 3.5. Man, honestly it did surprise me a bit because I've tried to play, even on GoldenEye, on Switch there, the
Yep.
whatever you call it. I couldn't even fucking do it, dude. I tried for like 5 minutes. I was like, I can't fucking control this thing. This sucks.
It's
So
tough.
going back to Perfect Dark, I didn't expect anything much better than that. But honestly, it played pretty well.
Yeah. And I guess if I could just piggyback off of you there, I almost had it at a 3.5, but I think I lowered it to a 3. And the biggest reason for me was just how unintuitive like the story was, and I just felt like, okay, this seems like an older game where they just can't connect you from like the tutorial, the quote unquote tutorial that you're supposed to kind of be doing to, okay, how do we start the story mode? I also hated that it just didn't say story mode. I wasn't even sure if that was really what I was playing when I selected it on the menu, because it kind of just, I don't remember what it said, but it just said,
I went right into missions. I didn't even go to the hangar or whatever that thing is.
Oh, so maybe you did something a little bit different, but I think I can't remember what it's called now. It's driving me crazy. But
Secret Ops, I think, maybe. I can't remember either, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but it drives me crazy. But either way, I just thought that could have been laid out a little bit better. So that, in a sense, felt a little old. Just the N64 in general just does not age well. The controller doesn't age well.
No, it really does not.
It's so tough to play an N64 game and not feel like you're 20 years behind.
People have hated me on Twitter, but yeah, that's how I feel about the system.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, maybe, hey, if you can get one of those like retro brawlers, the N64 controllers that they make, like if you can get like one of those, hey, that's probably the best way to play the N64 now. But just the single stick like first person shooters, they just don't age well because of that.
No, they really do not.
And I don't know if we brought this up, but I do think that this is actually a positive for aged, because it kind of needed to happen for you to have fun with this game. But there was auto aim, and I think that was huge. Because if I needed to move that cursor around, which you do at certain points, like I think when you have the sniper rifle, you need to like move it around yourself. It doesn't auto aim if you have the sniper, and stuff like that. But for the most part, it auto aims, and that's huge. That makes the game way more playable and just more enjoyable on every other level. But if it didn't have that, it would have definitely tanked the age score, I think. So how are you feeling about it, Stika?
I kind of agree with you on pretty much every point. I also give it a 3.5. Okay. Like the controls and like even the game design itself, it just feels old, and not in a good way. It doesn't feel like a classic. It just feels old. Like it's been surpassed, and it's kind of hard to go back to it. This is why I keep saying like boomer shooters usually age really well, because like you can still play Doom today and have a lot of fun with it. With it, you can play a lot of clones like Alien Trilogy or whatever, and you can still enjoy it. When I play GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, or even like the first Medal of Honor game, you feel the age. You feel how old those games are. You feel like the first person shooter the first person shooter genre was still sort of adjusting to consoles, because if you play Quake or Quake 2 on a PC, it's great. It still feels great. It feels amazing. But when you play those games on consoles, something gets lost. Something is lost in that transition. Something is just simply lost.
Unfortunately, yeah. But I think as far as like total scores here, we're all kind of right around the same area.
Yeah.
Yaiser came in at the lowest on this game at a 3.3. I came in right at the middle at a 3.5, and Stika came in the highest at a 3.7, which puts us right at a 3.5 overall.
3.5. Yeah. Cool.
Which I think, other than Super Mario 64, that's been our highest rated N64 game so far. Not that we've played a ton of them, but I mean the fact that we've played
Super Mario.
No, I said other than other than Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie was also rated.
Oh, Banjo. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so N64 has actually been getting a bad rap for us, at least. But we have been playing some
some real shitty games.
Subpar N64 games.
But we played some good ones too.
Yeah, and I think Perfect Dark is a good one.
Have you played Doom 64 yet?
We haven't, but I played it as a kid, and I actually loved it as a kid. So I'm excited to go back to see if it's actually still good. Yeah,
it's very good actually.
Cool.
It's way too dark, but it's very good.
I remember it being very dark. I remember putting the brightness as high as I could when I was a kid because
That's the best way to play
my pants. Yeah, I hated peeing my pants. But all right, now's the time of the show where I vaguely describe what we play next and have our guest guess it. So, Stika, if you're ready, I'm gonna spin the wheel.
Hit me.
All right, Stika, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
We have a stealth action game published by Activision, developed by Acquire, released in, this might be a little bit tougher for you, but released in North America, August of the year 2000 for the PlayStation 1.
Okay, now that is weird. Let me think. Acquire. Is it by Acquire?
Yep.
Is it a Tenchu game?
It's Tenchu 2. Very good. I did not think we were going to get that one.
Nice.
There we go.
I wish I had an applause button because I'd hit it.
No. Once you said the Acquire, I was like, what? What did they make? They made Wizardry. They made. Oh wait, they made Tenchu.
Yeah, Tenchu 2. I'm very excited to play this one. I've never played it before. I never played the first one either.
They're pretty good.
Nice. Yeah. So we're going to be joined by Amber from Big Mod Energy over on like TikTok and YouTube and stuff like that. She makes some insane mods to like Game Boys, and she does some insane work. She does like controller mods and all that stuff. It's pretty crazy. But she'll be joining us next week to play Tenchu 2.
Cool.
Before we go, we got 2 more things to do. First, quickly, Stika, would you recommend that people relive this game if they had never played it before and they were like, hey, man, should I play Perfect Dark for the N64? What would you tell them? I
would say if you're going to play it, play the remaster on either the Xbox 360 or Xbox One X, I think. I'm not sure which one has the rare replay. I get confused with all the Xbox they make conventions these days.
Yeah, Xbox is stupid. I get it.
Yeah,
they're all called the same thing.
Yeah, I would go with that. But even with those, I would say don't expect much. Like, expect it to be decent, not good, not great, just decent. So it's not a must play for you. This isn't something where you're like, you should definitely, take time out of your busy schedule to play this game. You want a must play Exhumed on the Sega Saturn or PlayStation, preferably the Saturn. Now that's a good FPS game. Never heard of it. I might have to put that down. It's known as, in the US, it's known as Power Slave. You might know it under that name. Power Slave. It sounds familiar, but I don't think I've ever played it. Okay, I guess I know what I'll recommend you. And Yaiser, what about you? Would you recommend that people relive this game?
I'm gonna go ahead and say no.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 no's so far. I would say the only reason why I'm saying yes is because I think it's the best FPS the N64 has to offer. So if you were trying to play an FPS game on the N64, then I'd be like, this is the one you want to play. Otherwise, skip it. Yeah, that's my only reason. That's fair. And that's not to say it's not a bad game. I thought it was. I was actually fairly surprised. It's not bad, but it's also but it has aged.
It's not good either, though.
That's fair. It's decent in my opinion. It's decent. That's fair. And I think I agree with Stika. I think if you were to play this game, go back and just play the remaster because that's what you're going to want to do anyway.
Yeah, it's probably way better.
All right, Stika, now's a good time to get those games that you're recommending for us to throw on the master list. You can give us 1 game, 2 games, 9 games. It's up to you, buddy. Ooh, okay. So first I'm going to recommend Power Slave for the Sega Saturn or PlayStation. Cool. Either one's fine, although usually the Saturn version is considered the definitive version. It's it's part boomer shooter and part Metroid, basically. Interesting. Okay. And it's all set in ancient Egypt. So it's a pretty great game.
The first few levels can be a little weird because you're just fighting like tiny scorpions or whatever. But give it time, you'll find the upgrades, you'll explore the world, and the game really grows from there.
Cool.
It sounds cool.
Have you gotten any Master System recommendations?
Master System, no.
No.
Oh, now you're in my territory then.
Quite a few Genesis games, but not Master System yet.
I expected as much. Okay, so Master System, Batman Returns. It's a great action platformer.
Oh.
The soundtrack is by the same composer behind the Streets of Rage games and the ActRaiser games, Yuzo Koshiro. And it's a really underrated game. And I would also recommend for the Master System Kenseiden. I'll type that one here because it's a bit hard just to say by it. Kenseiden, which is, how should I describe? Graphically, it almost looks like an early Sega Genesis game, and it even has like the game has two soundtracks: the original sound chip or an upgraded sound chip, which was an adapter you connected to your Master System.
Oh.
And it's like an action platformer set in ancient Japan with horror. Like imagine a Japanese Castlevania game, I guess, in a way.
I like Castlevania. I like Castlevania.
But the thing is, you also collect permanent upgrades as you progress through the game. Like you have an entire map, you visit the level, and if you beat the boss, you get like a new ability, or if you beat a challenge, you get like a permanent health boost, for example.
That sounds relatively ahead of its time for the Master System.
Yeah. Sounds fucking awesome.
Yeah, that's really
cool. I could recommend you games all day, so I'll just stick with these two.
Well, feel free in the comments if you want to leave us the bigger list, and we'll add them all to the master list because
send them over.
Yeah, I love getting recommendations of games that I've never heard before because obviously we get some of the recommendations of like, oh, do Crash Bandicoot or do Twisted Metal and like stuff like obviously like games that have pretty big followings, but yeah, some of these games never hearing of these, like excited to dip our toes into them.
For sure.
All right, before we get out of here, I just want to tell you guys about the Patreon one more time. $2 a month to get onto the Patreon to submit a game that that we can play there. So it's like I said, it's only $2 a month, and we play a Patreon game once a month, and we're gonna play another one in 2 weeks. So if you want to head over there, link is in the description below. We appreciate anybody and everybody over there.
100%.
All right, Stika, you want to tell these guys where they can find you one last time?
Of course. My name is Stika, so just type ST1KA on anywhere on Google, and you'll find all my socials. I'm mostly on YouTube, but you'll also find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever.
Perfect. And thank you again so much for coming on. We really appreciate it with the time.
It was great being here.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, catch us next week as we play Tenchu 2 with Amber from Big Mod Energy. And until then, take care.
Peace.
See ya.